And there is a saying in Korean that it goes something like, once you know, it's easy. There's so many things that I'm like, oh my God, how did she publish this podcast on like Apple Podcasts? Her photo is there. Like, and then you don't realize that it's like just like 5 clicks.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammy and Michelle.
This week, we're chatting with Monica Lim, who has an impressive portfolio of projects. She writes, has a YouTube channel, is an ambassador for the note-taking app Notion, has been teaching English for a decade, recently moved her family across the world from South Korea to Texas, and on top of all of that, recently launched her podcast, Let's Get Practical. She's always so transparent about her process, sharing what she's learning through entrepreneurship and about her journey with ADHD. Monica had me on her podcast, Let's Get Practical, and I knew after speaking with her that I wanted to flip the mic and get a chance to learn more about her and her journey. Monica, welcome to Build a Wealthy Spirit.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Monica, so your podcast is called Let's Get Practical. What do you mean by getting practical?
So when I think of practical, I just felt that for somebody who has ADHD, like actually doing things or getting myself to actually do it, finish activities is like, it's pretty hard. So I keep thinking of, I don't know, like little ways to hack my brain to want it to do certain things. And I've noticed that what works for other people did not work for me. And I was learning so much just by observing how people did things and interpreting, oh, I could use this bit, I could use that bit. And it really started as, let's get practical, as in, let's find ways that work for other people. And I think the initial intention was, let's talk to this like non-obvious heroes, like people who nobody knows about them, but there's always something to learn about them. There's always something practical takeaway from that experience. And I think ever since that, like it's evolved. Like I'm talking to people who are well known in their space, but it's really focused on, let's get practical. It's not about what worked for like everybody else, but yeah, what are things that work for us, for you, for me? Yeah, so that's like what practical means, like, taking action.
Something I love is that the start of your podcast is such a great example of that. I remember being on Twitter and you had shared that you had launched this podcast and you were like, oh, I just recorded it off my phone in my car. And so immediately I had to go listen to it because I was like, wow, that's amazing that you just got started. Like buying the mic, getting set up is a huge barrier for so many people who are interested in starting a podcast. And then I listened to it and I was like, this quality is pretty good. What are we doing? Buying these mics, upgrading. More than that, I think your content was really great. Like you were just sharing about your recent experience. You were talking a little bit, I think, about your move in that episode. And it's such a great example. Like you just pulled out your phone and started recording your podcast. And the quality was actually really great. And that's such a great, what's the story? Like when superheroes become superheroes. It's a great like genesis story for your podcast.
Mm-hmm. And it does. It sounds really good. I was so impressed. I was like, Michelle, we have to have her on our podcast. This is from her car. Like, it's amazing.
And I have to add that, we're living in 2023 and it's amazing. Just so many, like the amount of tools and the amount of technology, the amount of services that are available today that facilitate that, right? So like that has been the whole thing about being practical. Like I want to discover these tools. And there is a saying in Korean that it goes something like, once you know, it's easy. Like there's so many things that I'm like, oh my God, how did she publish this podcast on like Apple Podcasts? Her photo is there. Like, and then you don't realize that it's like just like 5 clicks. Like it's literally, it's
in
literally,
an hour, yeah.
Right? So that's the thing that I just want to do for not only for me, but for other people. Cause I'm like, there's so much joy in getting something done, or in just having this creation, right? With like your fingerprints. And I think for people like me, like, I can't do that. And I just kind of like shelf it, right? Like I shelve it, like I cannot do that. But I just want to inspire people that, like it's actually super easy once you know what you want to do. And even if you don't know what to do, just kind of like tinkering, you'll find things. So just knowing which tool to use and just starting messy. That has been like the biggest learning for me. Just start messy. You can course correct. You can fix things. You can change the whole thing. Like I've done like 3-4 times. But once you get started, it's that revolving door. When it's like, it's not moving, you have to put a lot of pressure to start getting the door moving. But once it's there, like just get a little push and it's done.
I love that piece of advice. And I'm curious to know, because your background, I believe, is in civil engineering. And I'm curious to know, when was the first time that you did that, where you were like, I'm curious about doing either a side project or a creative project or something outside of my field? And what did that process look like for you?
Wow, that's it. That's a really good question. So I think I look at my daughter. I have 2 kids, and I look at my daughter, and there's so much of like, I can remember a lot of my past just by seeing my daughter. Oh, I used to do that too. And I think I had this like creative, I don't know, energy and like desire in me, like ever since I was very, very young, because I see my daughter playing with like paper, and like she creates stuff and she gets so excited about building things with paper. And I remember being like that. And I think that sort of stopped. Just kind of like my creative was like died when I was like, well, it kind of like stopped. And then it was like, school, academics, engineering school. I worked on pretty like conservative fields like construction, even mining.
Whoa.
And I think for me, it was with teaching English that I did, like after quitting my job, I was like, I want to figure things out. Like I want to see, like, this is not exciting to me. And there was just a lot of opportunities when I was in Korea to teach English. It's like the easy sort of freelancing job that anybody who speaks English can do, right? They don't require training. Okay, do you speak English? Okay, come, like they just put you in. And it was the first time where I didn't have a certain goal. Like I need to finish this project, but for all of my lessons, I just came up with like interesting things to do, right? So I think like my creativity, like really, I don't know, like just permeates like everywhere. So that's when I started like, oh, wow, I thought of this idea, the students liked it. And then that fed into my sort of like, I don't know, like confidence boost, or like, oh, this is possible. And even with, I've also worked on like fashion show production and just a lot of different things. And every time I have to do something, I will just kind of like treat it as this individual opportunity. And I'm not even forcing that. Like just my brain dances and like goes places and like it does things, or it wants to do things. And I think with COVID, like all my projects got canceled. Everything got canceled. All the classes got canceled. Everything got canceled. And I was forced to just kind of like me, the computer. Okay, what is Instagram? Like, what is YouTube? I like literally remember myself kind of like searching, okay, social media marketing. How do you do that? What are hashtags? And we're talking about 2023. Like, it's just like, I feel like, oh, wow, why didn't I not know this before? I think with COVID, I've allowed myself to just be more creative and like just letting my brain, I took off the brakes to my brain and like just have fun, like, just roam around, have fun, what's there. And I discovered Twitter. I discovered all of these like amazing online communities. I think it really started when I was young. It died. And then with COVID and the internet and like this online sort of sphere, it's like on steroids. It's like, like it's just like, it's so, it's like, I feel in my element, just being creative with everything.
So I have a question. So you were in civil engineering, and I don't know like what the climate was like at that time or even where you were living in Korea? I know a lot of our listeners, maybe even one fellow co-host of this podcast, are interested in leaving a traditional work type setting, something that you have trained, you've been educated to do for something creative. When did you first start getting that idea? And were there people around you doing it? How did you kind of go about making that move?
So for me, and I don't maybe it's not the reply that you want to hear, but I really felt I had quit my job and I had a pretty stable job at a pretty nice company. If I work for this company, everybody would be kind of jealous. And for many, many years, and I quit really, it comes down to at the bottom because I was bored. And I regretted that decision for a long, long time.
Wow.
And even today, I wonder, I always think of this negative probabilities, what would happen if I had stayed? Because I think today I noticed that whatever you do, you can find ways to be creative and to have that channel. And I worked for such a large company that I think I could have found a space within that company where I could be in my element. I could still have my stable income. And I've realized later that, being an entrepreneur or the creative economy, this is financially, it can be pretty stressful. And I don't know if I suggest that for everybody. I really don't think that it is for everybody. Right. And for me today, I'm just super happy because I do have sort of a stable income doing creative work, but I know that it is not I don't want to sell, just quit your job and do all of that. But then one thing that I realized is that I recently quit my job too, right? So in my journey, I've had this quitting for the wrong reasons. And I think my last full-time job, I really think I quit for the right reasons and I'm very happy. So it was a creative job where I could be doing my own thing. That's why I chose that job where I was doing business development for the startup that it was in a design kind of related field, all creative everywhere, right? But then I noticed that, the hours and I'm at a different phase in my life. And, I was kind of creative, but just the overall environment of this company, where it's heading, the direction, and I knew that long term it would not work, right? And for me, one thing that I did that I'm really thankful and glad is that before I quit, I did sort of dip my toes in, could I make money being creative? Could I sort of maybe not match my income, but can I make this happen and not be stressed out about money? Because I've been immigrant family, money has been such a big issue for me. I worry about money all the time. And we can talk about this on this podcast. So right before I quit, about a month before I quit, I sort of told people that I was, kind of quitting. I might be looking, or I think I phrased it on Twitter. Somebody I know has expertise in Notion, loves working with creators, entrepreneurs, has this experience and is looking for, a job. Do you know anybody who needs help? And I think, timing and the stars aligned. There was this YouTuber who reached out, does your friend do XYZ? And I was telling her, oh, I'm that friend. Oh, really? And then so about a month before I quit my job, I got myself a very small consulting contract. It was not a big contract, but it did sort of validate, wow, you can make money doing this stuff, right? For somebody like me, stressed out about money, ADHD, money anxiety, lack of, insecurity ball, just with all of that in mind, for me, having a lead before I left my job was super important.
What I love about that is you kind of almost point out in your story that it's not a binary of work or anti-work. It's almost there's seasons where working makes sense. There's seasons where not working makes sense. And there's seasons where like the consulting is kind of like a little in between, and you kind of get a feel for what's working for you different times of your life.
I'm really big on this like labels or words that like stuck with me. And one of them was this idea of work-life blend, and this idea of not even balance, because I really don't believe in balance. Like I'm borderline workaholic. I love work. I just get excited very easily about specific things. And it just so happens that at this time, the little things that like there are many times like the things that get me excited are happening with higher frequency. So like work-life balance, like I was always like, oh, like, you know, like I don't believe in that. But this idea of blending and this mix, like it's just like my life work, like I'm working from home, like everything is like so intermixed, and I've just learned to embrace that and accept it. But having that like bad quitting job experience where I regretted, I was kind of like depressed, and I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, my identity. And yeah, I know like you should not place all of your identity in your work, but I realized that I had a really good job, like it was very well paid, and I had just quit for the wrong reason. So like, I think exhausting your options, like, is it a matter of team? Is it like this? Like after do all of that, I think you have peace of mind. And yeah, it's not one or the other. Like, I don't know, this is like just not related, but related. Like someone was telling me like, if you're not ready to get married, if you are like picky, like if you could be married with anybody, that's like when you know you're ready to get married. Like it doesn't matter who you marry, but I mean, like I kind of don't agree with that, but you get the point, right? It's just, if you're not happy with one job, chances are you might not be happy with other jobs too, right? It's just like changing the work environment.
Yeah, I really love that perspective. I also want to take a look too at your journey, because you mentioned in this podcast and you mention it in a lot of the work that you do about your journey with ADHD. And I'm curious to know a little bit more about when you started to suspect that you had ADHD, and if or how that diagnosis changed how you approach even just how you do things or how you think about things.
Okay, you guys ready? Buckle up. It's like a long answer. So for me, like I did not suspect that at all. Like I was like, I love studying. Like I did really well at school. Like I was just really into classes, into school. Like I like scholarships. Like I saw no signs of ADHD, and like I think ADHD needs a little rebrand, and like just kind of like it's you have this idea of boys running around, fidgeting all the time, and I did not have that at all. So when I started suspecting this, something is off, or maybe something is wrong, or something is different about me, was this getting bored. Like after school, I switched jobs like so many times. And I would just get bored of like my work. I would just get really excited and then very fast, really bored. And luckily, because I don't know, like I had done pretty well at school and I could market myself pretty well, I just had a lot of opportunities. So I think I tricked myself first. Okay, like I just haven't found the thing that I need. I need to keep searching, right? So that was like the story I was telling myself. And I need to search while I'm young. So I need to like quit what I'm doing now. And then, and if something happened to come in the periphery of my, you know, like in my vision, and I just could not stop thinking about that. So I had to quit and then like get on it. And I go back to COVID because there was a big transition for me with COVID, but the internet was like, oh my God, this is my space. This is my world. Like it was so exciting. Like I was learning things new, and like every day I was meeting so many cool people. For my brain, like my brain was in heaven, but then I think that also took a toll. Like I was sort of like excited, but also very burnt out. My brain was just like so loud all the time. And close to that time, like somebody that I really closely follow is Mari Pullen, who is also a Notion consultant. Like Notion she has this excellent course like Notion Mastery, which, I joined. And she was like a creator where the things that I would say like just resonated so much. And how she was thinking about things, I could totally relate. And it was like kind of like the first time, oh my God, I met my soulmate. I remember she talked about her ADHD. And that's when like I started suspecting like, oh, maybe like, do I maybe like, no way. Like, and then I just kind of like went back and forth. And then at one point it was like, I think December of 2019 or 20, I went to a doctor to just find a diagnosis. What do I have? And even the doctor was like, I don't think you have ADHD, like, I don't think so. And then like after, tests, like questions, I realized that, yeah, like I start excited with things. I never finish things, like all of this switching and then all the benefits that come with that. Right. So like the network thinking and all the different connections that you can make with your brain and we can really excel in different ways. But post diagnosis, I just became a very different person in terms of, I just felt something was wrong with me. Like, like I'm like quitting again. Oh, why can't I, like, why am I so undecisive? Like, why am I so overwhelmed? And like, instead of all of these questions of like, why me? Like, and then like, just feeling horrible about myself. I really just felt just so much compassion for who I was. And I'm like, I have this thing. I cannot escape it. This is me. I just, I cannot return this. And it was really learning to work with me and how my brain worked and having labels again, like learning about ADHD, just getting my education, like why am I not doing that thing? And how can I get to do that thing? The thing that like, my brain is like, doesn't want to do, or it's just really a lot of friction. It could be something like laundry or things that people find very easy, but my brain is like really not up for it. At the same time, like I know that I need to sort of like put the brakes on, right? Like if I can see myself, my brain like, oh, more, like it just gets really excited. Like I know that I need to kind of stop. So just like I have this window, this new lens through which I'm looking at myself. And it's been like life-changing, just self-compassion. I know like how I work. It's almost like I know that there is a way my brain works and like learning that, right? Like, okay, my energy level is pretty low. So like just to give one example that I have fights with my husband all the time because like he's the most neurotypical person on earth. And I'm like the opposite, right? So he's like, okay, we're going to do this thing. And then he does it. And I'm like, not like that, right? So I realized that one of my biggest stressors is cooking and feeding the family. And because I'm staying at home, my husband, works outside. I felt like resentful of like, why do I have all this responsibility of like cooking, like now with the kids, like off school, 10 meals a week, I have to work. And I just felt like very resentful. And my husband, like, I would like ask him, okay, I need help. But his help was like, okay, tell me what to do and I will do it. And it's the idea of, no, like, I don't want to tell you what to do. You figure out what to do. You figure out the groceries that you need for your meal. Like, I don't want to think about dinner today. And then we split like, okay, 2 days, 3 days. And oh my God, I just felt, even with that small step, just so much better. Today was my cooking turn. And I did not feel resentful at all. Like, I just knew, okay, I'm going to cook. Tomorrow my husband has it. So like, it's just this one thing where I know, okay, cooking is really overwhelming. And I know it's not for other people, but for me, cooking is overwhelming and getting rejected by my kids. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like that. So all of that, to me, my brain rejects it. And it's just learning about my brain and knowing, okay, my brain doesn't like it. It's a no, or maybe we'll change this and make it more exciting or more manageable. And for creative projects, it's the same thing. I can see myself super excited about, let's say, recording a podcast, and then I'm done. And I'm like, okay, somebody has to edit that. Somebody has to write the show notes. Somebody has to do that. And instead of just really being hard on myself, like I'm lazy or I'm procrastinating, what I've been doing is I'm going to hire help, somebody who can help me do that. And I still get really involved, but having somebody help is just so much easier. So all of that learning happened after I got diagnosed with ADHD, like learning how I work, having names, knowing what's going on. That's, I think, a huge step.
That's so awesome and so relatable, because I think in general, like the world and a lot of the systems in the world, like education, work, they're very cookie cutter and almost like trying to be a one size fit all. And if you fit that size, great. But if you don't, then a lot of times we might feel like the problem is us. But what I really like about what you were saying is that if we can understand and learn more about ourselves and how our mind works, I think it also makes it easier to take a look and say, okay, these things are easier for me, or these are the things that bother me. And then when you know that, you can communicate it.
There's something also about labeling different parts of yourself that make it so that you can utilize the good of that part and give that part tools to work through difficult aspects, like or challenging things for that part of yourself too. And I think it's so easy for us to be like, oh no, there's something wrong with me. But it's like, no, this is also a superpower. I just have to learn how to channel it too.
Definitely.
And you mentioned, Monica, delegating, which is something I actually wanted to ask you about, because I think it's something you're really good at. And I've heard you speak about like almost having a framework for it. So I would love to ask, especially because I think so many people who listen to this podcast have so many different stuff going on in their lives and also have so many things that I'll speak for myself. Like sometimes I try to do everything. And I wanted to get your thoughts, like how you think about delegating tasks now.
So I was one of those people who did not believe in delegation. I'm like, okay, I'm the one who can do this the best.
Yeah.
And I did it the best. And like, I would just do it. And of course, it's so limiting. Yeah, you could be the best at this thing, but you only have 24 hours a day. And I think through rite of passage, one of the I don't know, breakout rooms that I had was this lady called Christine Carrillo, and she was like a CEO, and then she was also coaching CEOs. And this was one call. She's like, yeah, I'm in Hawaii. And I think she lives in Hawaii now. And she was just talking about how her like virtual assistant who was, back then, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, based in the Philippines, was just doing a lot of things for her. And I would have never thought with like, my salary or like this just really up and down sort of like unstable income, can I afford like hiring somebody? Like, was this so foreign to me, right? But then she wrote this article, and it's like my secret weapon or something. She was just sharing like step by step how she hired people and like which platform she was using and like what she was doing, like how to kind of like sift through all the applicants, who to find. And that was like 3 years ago, where I'm like, wow, I'm going to give it a try. And ever since then, I've been really heavily relying on, it's not even full-time help. You're not hiring an employee, because that would be too scary for me, but you really are hiring for extra hands. Mm-hmm. I take a lot of like lessons from like my fashion production day or like work. And there's this thing called, we say like extra hands or stage hands. And like literally it's like an extra pair of hands. Like has like no face, like nothing. It just comes and like we'll shift. I don't know. We'll put a prop from one place to another. We'll move the chair at this time. So there are things that are not that difficult to do. And I've realized that a lot of the things that we do, there are these like high level, just really high energy work, decision making, and all of those things are like high leverage stuff. But there are lots of other things that somebody else could do. After embracing that, it was like, oh, wow, how can I, hire my first person? You have Fiverr, and lots of lessons learned, lots of mistakes made. And I think now, after working with a lot of different, like virtual assistants, a lot of different people, I have really learned how to train, like how to hire, train, and get them to do work. This is another project or like product down the line. Like I really want to help everybody like understand how this works and how it is not like it's not a formula, but it is something that has like a framework, different kind of like modules, right, to delegation. And I think everybody should give it a try. So for example, like fast forward 4 years or 3 years of me like learning how to delegate. These are like really high turnover positions where, you know, you're hiring people that like have a lot of other jobs, right? Like I go for like, I'm willing to teach you. So I'm willing to go for people who don't have a lot of experience, you know, no experience, so cheaper. So like, I feel I don't have that pressure of I need to like get all the juice out of this person. Like I'm really laid back with time, you know, timestamps or timings. Like if they tell me, okay, it took me 10 hours to do this activity, like, you know, just I believe them and I do that. But I've learned how to train them, and like I've made a lot of mistakes. And the mistakes are a lot of like just hiring the wrong people. I really think that once you are very good at selecting the right person, you can train them, you can teach them. But it's really like once you pick the wrong person, like it's just really hard to work with them. And I have built sort of this intuition, right? Okay, this person, easy to work with, nice. So a lot of that, I think, came with a lot of trial and error. But I usually hire people who are in the low price point, recent grads, you know, like I just feel that people who have a lot of experience, sometimes like they can be very stubborn about how they do things and they expect more, right, out of the job. So I usually go for people who are young, they want to learn, and they don't need to know a lot of things. But there are a couple things that I look for when I'm hiring. And one of the things is, are they easy to work with? Some people, they will just like ask you like too many questions. And I feel like for me, yeah, you know, like at first it's like, okay, they're very detailed, but at some point answering questions, it's like more work for me. So I'm doing this to do less work. So you really get a feel for what you want, but people who are easy to work with, whatever that means to you, right? Easy to work with. And another thing that it's very important for me is like taste. Like, it's just like, this is something that is really hard to teach. And I get a lot of initial samples, right? So like doing very low risk, like low leverage mini projects in the beginning is very important to like calibrate. Okay, when I tell you this, I mean this, or I'm going to forget everything. So you have to keep bugging me. I have ADHD. That's one of the first things I tell them. So it's really like communicating and educating these people. And yeah, I think I have become a master delegator.
Well, I feel like that's so helpful to hear. Do you feel like with the people that you're hiring, because you do get them at a point where they're still growing and learning, do they find that they learn a lot from you, or what's their experience, I guess, like going through that process? Because I imagine not everybody is upskilling everybody that they're working with.
I think they really appreciate it. Like I think they can see how fast their skills are getting upgraded. So I teach a lot of Notion, even some Figma stuff. So these are very marketable skills for them. And I can see that they really appreciate it. Sometimes like what happens, like just recently this weekend, this virtual assistant, like a Korean virtual assistant that I had. And this is the other thing, like I was so stressed out about writing emails in Korean because my Korean is not, it's like my Korean is not at a like professional level. And it's also because I have very high standards. So like I want it to be a certain way. And then like, I know that it's not, you know, it's not up there. And every time I was so stressed out until I decided, okay, what if I hire somebody to help me write emails? So that's the other thing about delegation. Like there's always things that are stressing you out and somebody can do them a lot more easily. And it's just, yeah, like finding out what you can delegate. That's like also a big thing. But anyhow, going back to your question, I recently had like an old BA that, just messaged me and said, oh, hi, Miss Monica, like I have this internship, I have these two options and I just want to hear your thoughts on this career decision of mine. Aww. And I felt like, oh my God, I just felt so touched that this virtual assistant, I was like, like I loved her. She thought of me after like a long time as somebody kind of like with career wisdom, somebody who could like put her in the right direction. So I thought that was like really nice.
That's so lovely. There's so many parts of that are so helpful to hear. One, just in general, that you're delegating, and I love that you came into it the same way that you go into a lot of things. Like you said, you start messy, you figure it out, and you start to develop intuition and trust, and you start to figure out what type of person you like to work with. And also, I think this also shows that there's so many opportunities to learn from people like on this journey, like on the creator journey or the entrepreneurship journey. Like I've seen it for myself too, where you have the opportunity to almost apprentice under somebody. And there's so many, like a lot of people are hiring for those type of roles. And then you can take that information and actually, when you go further in your life, you can either use that information or, it seems like she kind of looks to you as a bit of a mentor too. It's a very mutualistic relationship. And I love that. And it kind of makes sense, I feel like, too, with your teaching background.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing with the teaching background. I'm like, oh, this is probably like one of your strengths too, is how to like mold people and teach them. So that makes a lot of sense.
Monica, I think to wrap up, something that'd be really helpful to hear is if somebody is listening to this and they're thinking about, I want to launch a project on my own or dip my toes into entrepreneurship or creative work, if there's a piece of advice that you would have for somebody in that situation.
I have this like book that really, I don't know, it's just a very simple idea, but the book went through just explaining everything about being a minimalist entrepreneur by Sahil, like he's the founder of Gumroad. And there's this one quote in that book that reads like, you don't learn, then start, you start, then learn. And that's one of the main quotes of the book. And the book sort of gives a little blueprint of how to like start with not in this like big way, but like how can you start from where you are? I don't know, like 3 things that have helped me. And 3 things, and then one thing that I'm going to say, like, it's like almost like a negative, and it will make sense after I explain. But one thing is start messy. And I think that it's very similar to you don't learn then start, you start then learn. But this idea of just messiness, right? And I waited so long to start the podcast because I wanted to make it nice. And like, I was listening to all like Fresh Air, Tim Ferriss, like all of these nice podcasts. And I'm like, I wanted to at least try to imitate them, right? And then I decided, no, like that's not me, and just starting messy. The other thing is this idea of making like small bets. And I love this idea of like, you just never know what's gonna work. It's just like, oh my God, like I never thought I would be this like Notion consultant, right? I mean like, oh, this is like so easy. Like, why would anybody hire me to do this thing that like, it just like, so it's like naturally like easy and intuitive. And then like people started like offering, money and like, my time. And along with that, I think finding your first customer, like, you don't need a landing page, but try to find your first paid customer. And I think that has been like really validating for me. Like first customer, making lots of small bets, and then starting small, like starting not small, like starting messy and starting from where you are. So books that like really were a power kind of like push for me was The Minimalist, Entrepreneur. And the thing that I would say, don't listen to this. It's like the fact that, so like this is the negative, like you should not do this. It's like, you don't need a niche to start. Like you don't need a particular thing that only like, I don't know, you can do. Just do things. And then you'll realize your niche will kind of surface. Like it will float above everything else. That's the mistake that I've made. I was like, oh, what's my niche? Like, should I do this? Should I do that? And I just started doing things and realized that, like Notion consulting, like I love doing this. I love promoting this because I hate promoting my English. Like I feel like, oh, like there's so many people who are probably like a lot more affordable. Like I just felt always like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk about this. But with Notion consulting, like I love talking about it. I love promoting. I love how it makes people like feel great about what they do. And that has become sort of like gradually my niche right now and the work that I do. So start messy and connect with a lot of people. Like there are so many people who are out there who are just like a half step ahead of you. And those are the best people that can help you and will be willing to help you, like, because they're really excited about like, oh my God, I just edited this thing on Descript and it works. And they're the best people to go for advice.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny because we first started talking because you were just tweeting about, I think you had a road trip or something and you were looking for podcast recommendations. And then you messaged me and we chatted and I ended up going on your podcast. And now you're on our podcast.
And that's, the thing about that, Michelle, like I talked about taste. And for me, like taste is very important. Like, I mean, it's almost like a prejudice thing, right? I should not judge people by their taste. But like, I listened to the podcast they recommended. I think it was a Jay Shetty. Like, it was this one particular podcast. And it was like, wow, I would have never heard that podcast had I not been because of you. And I think there's a lot of decisions that you make before you make a recommendation. Like you look at this person, what would this person like? Mm-hmm. And I think overall, I just sensed, she's a very, in my brain, cataloged you, right? Like my brain put you in this catalog, in this category of very thoughtful person. And I'll say, I want to get to know her. Like, so that's the thing about connecting. You don't need to provide super advice. It's just like a little bit of thoughtfulness and sharing. Like you had to hit publish on that tweet to tell me like, oh, listen to his podcast. And that's, I think, the one thing that I would tell people, like, you have something that can help one soul. Like they're like over like billions and billions of people. Like there's somebody, and the internet connects all of us. So yeah, this idea of sharing to connect.
Yeah, that's so funny. It's so true too, because I like a lot of times people just throw things at you when you ask for content. And so I do try to be like, at least here's something different or something maybe that you'd be interested in. And also there's always that moment, when you're hitting publish. I'm a lot more comfortable now. Now I'm like all over Twitter and I'll just tell people like if I want to say something. But before it's also sometimes you're like, oh, well, if this person gets like, 10 episodes and then they're not going to listen to any of them. It doesn't matter. I'll just be throwing my name. I never know which one's going to hit and which isn't. It's almost the same thing you were saying about like the small bets. It's just like putting out little, pieces out there. And there's almost like no real goal in mind. But it's funny how that was the thing that ended up connecting us.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Monica, it's been great having you on our podcast. I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this episode. I think they will learn a lot. I think you have a lot of great advice. Where can they find you if they are looking for more of your content?
So I think the best way like today is, Twitter. I am working to develop a website for finally another also on my project list, a website where I have just a little more curated information about myself. But I have a Substack and I also have a Twitter account. My handle is Monica Lim Co. And for a lot of things, I think that's been my handle. So Twitter is like the best way to connect. And yeah, it's so nice to be in the podcast.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you so much for coming. And we will share all your links in our show notes so people can easily find you. You can just, whatever app you're using, you should be able to just click on it. And we definitely recommend Let's Get Practical. You dive into some of the things more that we talked about here, like delegation. You have really cool interviews with like entrepreneurs and creators. You ask very thoughtful questions. So we definitely recommend Let's Get Practical too. And Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a joy to have you and to chat with you today.
Thank you.
Takeaways.
Sammy, I'm so excited to talk about takeaways from this episode. It was so awesome to have Monica on, and I have so many thoughts about what she said.
I loved having Monica on. She is so insightful. She just has like a really great way of looking at everything and getting things done.
I agree, Sammy. A few things that stuck out to me. One, she talks about starting messy, like getting involved. You'll learn as you do it, but don't be afraid to get messy. And I love how she epitomizes that in so many different ways. Again, she launched her podcast by recording with her iPhone in her car while she was waiting for her kids, which I think is pretty cool.
Which honestly, you guys should go listen to because it sounds so good. I literally heard that and I was like, okay, we have to get her on our podcast because she's clearly a star. If this is how she sounds in her car, just like off the cuff recording.
Yeah, it's so true.
I love her whole idea of getting practical. And especially when it comes to her ADHD and getting practical with her ADHD and coming up with strategies or using tools that help manage her ADHD symptoms. And it reminds me of like when I talk to my therapist, one thing that she always has me do is label different parts of myself. Like, this is my flamboyant dancer self who's very creative and very into all that kind of stuff. Then I have my disciplined self who's super organized and on top of it. Then there's the compassionate part of me. And each of these aspects of myself have strengths, and each of these aspects of myself have weaknesses. And part of it is learning how to work with both aspects so I can bring out what I'm good at and help facilitate myself in dealing with these things that I'm not so good at.
I totally agree, Sammy. I think Monica's a great example about the power of understanding your mind and using what you know to work with yourself and also be compassionate, because some things come easy to us, some things are challenging, but in either case, it's important to just recognize what those things are.
I also loved how she delegates things. And honestly, her podcast gets even deeper into this, but she just has a great way of approaching the idea of delegation and using it as a tool. Like when she said, oh, I can do everything, that's how she thought in the beginning. That reminded me so much of me. I'm like, oh, I'll just do it. It's better that I just do it.
Same.
And I found that in my workplace does not work. Other people can really help, and other people also bring diversity of thought and diversity of opinion that can help your idea be even better.
Honestly, Sammy, I'm tempted to bring Monica back at one point just to talk about delegation.
Ooh.
She had so many great thoughts. We were even chatting with her after just to deep dive. And she's such a natural teacher. You can tell that this is something that she's so passionate about and gets excited about, which I just love to see in somebody because she's just lighting up.
100% agree, Michelle. Her Sparketype must be like a sage or something like that because she is, you can tell she's just an awesome teacher.
That's exactly right, Sammy. And we would love to know what stuck out to you from this episode. Monica gave us a lot of really interesting tidbits, and you can go to buildawealthyspirit.com, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts, let us know if she sparked any ideas or projects that you might want to launch.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rulebook and we rethink the status quo.